What's going on, guys? This is Tower number 9. This is going to be another Star Wars Unlimited gameplay video. This time we have my Tarkin Double Command deck playing against ZuhairGalaxy on Command Vader. So Double Command is an interesting build. Basically, this allows you to have a ton of ramp because not only do you get Resupply and Super Laser Technician for a villainy command deck, but you can also play Command the card itself, which is another ramp piece, in addition to having some general utility as removal and so on. Um, so in this case, I'm playing Tarkin. Tarkin, I think, is actually a pretty cool leader. He can get some cool stuff going with his experience tokens. So we're going to lead off here with Colonel Yularen, 2 cost 2/3. When you play a command unit, including this one, heal 1 damage from your base. My opponent plays a seasoned shore trooper, and I will take the initiative. So in this situation, what I want to do is ideally trade have Yularen get stronger and then take out the potentially take out that trooper without losing Yularen myself. So what I do there is I let off by attacking the enemy base. If my opponent had attacked Yularen with the trooper, I would have ambushed with the super laser tech, but he ended up attacking the base instead, so I just played the super laser tech normally. My opponent then plays a resupply, ramping up a bit, and I'll take the initiative. So in this situation, what I can do is I can deploy General Veers. So Veers will give my other Imperial units +1/+1. That will then allow me to trade the Super Laser Technician into the Seasoned Shore Trooper, defeating both units and giving me a extra resource when the Super Laser Technician is defeated. And that will then allow me to bring out Tarkin. So there's General Veers. My opponent, so my opponent counters this by playing out a copy of, I believe, Agent Callus to ambush Veers. So Veers is a 3/3. Callus at 4/4 is able to defeat him. And yeah, so there's Callus defeats Veers, does take 3 damage himself, draws a card, but it does mean that my super laser tech is now able to trade with Callus and become a resource. My opponent hits the base for 2. I'm going to use Tarkin's ability to give an experience counter to Colonel Yularen. And now I'm going to be able to have Colonel Yularen defeat that trooper, which is exactly what happens there. And then I'm going to deploy Tarkin, swing again, and give another experience to Colonel Yularen. And my opponent has taken the initiative here. Now up to 6 resources. That does mean that there is a risk that Vader could see play this turn if we see another piece of ramp coming out for my opponent, another copy of Resupply or Super Laser Technician. So I have to be a little worried about Vader deploying this turn. Now let's see how this develops. A Gladiator Star Destroyer deploys 5/6, and when played, it gives a unit Sentinel. So the Sentinel there does mean that I am not able to attack his base with any space units, but I don't have any space units. The ability doesn't really do anything. However, that is also a good potential target for an overwhelming barrage. I end up removing it with command. So choose to give 2 experience tokens to a unit. A friendly unit deals damage equal to its power to a non-unique enemy unit. Put this into play as a resource or return a unit from your discard pile to your hand. I end up choosing to give 2 experience to Colonel Yularen and then have him deal damage equal to his power, which is enough to defeat the gladiator in one shot. So then Tarkin attacks, gives experience to Yularen. Yularen attacks, and we're going to move to the next turn. All right, let's see what happens here. I do have some overwhelming barrages, and those could be very strong here because with Yularen now with 5 experience on Yularen, he's actually strength 7, which means that if Vader deploys here, I can just play Overwhelming Barrage, target Yularen, and deal 9 damage to defeat him immediately. So my opponent does deploy Vader, and there's the Overwhelming Barrage, Vader off the board. And with that, my opponent actually just concedes. This is basically an untenable situation. So pretty quick game there. But ultimately, I was able to get a lot of advantage with those early experience tokens and get into a really strong spot. Let's see how things continue. All right. So this is a bad opening hand, and I end up mulliganing it. The reason is the only 2-cost unit that I could play is the Snowtrooper Lieutenant, which is mostly used for its when played effect. The when played effect here doesn't do anything because I won't have other units on the board. Now I would have potentially a good continuation with ramp cards, but I would rather have like a better 2-drop play. So I end up mulliganing and will be able to play a Colonel Yularen here. I do end up resourcing a Overwhelming Barrage, which you normally don't really want to do, but in that situation with 2 of them in hand, I would rather get rid of one of them and maintain better plays for the other turns. We do see a First Legion Snowtrooper deployed to cost 2/3, and when attacking a damaged enemy unit, it gets +2 attack and overpower. And I have Colonel Yularen. Sorry about that, guys. I am still sick as of this recording, unfortunately. Let's see how this goes. All right, so I play out a super laser tech. My opponent plays a resupply, kind of a similar situation to what we've seen in the previous game. I do heal 1 damage from my base from playing the super laser tech, though, thanks to Colonel Yularen's ability. I am then going to attack the enemy base for 2. I have some cool options here. So I could actually play, Snowtrooper Lieutenant to have my super laser tech attack for 4. Um, I could also I could also then play the I could also then play the Emperor's Royal Guard. Um, we'd have to see exactly what happens, but yeah. All right, so we're gonna have a opponent plays a fallen lightsaber there, which I don't love. That's gonna give +3/+3. So I was gonna just attack in with this guy, but I actually decide no, no, no. I gotta do the Snowtrooper Lieutenant first. So the situation here is if I attack in normally without using the Snowtrooper Lieutenant, I deal 2 damage, and then he's got 4 HP left, which he could then defeat Yularen and be left with 2 HP. If I do it this way, though, by attacking with the Super Laser Tech for 4 damage, if he attacks into one of my units, he will die on retaliation, rather than being able to potentially take one out. So in that case, using the Snowtrooper Lieutenant early is favorable. So the Fallen Lightsaber has an extra bonus if you attach it to a Force unit, but a First Legion Snowtrooper is not a Force unit. I am kind of curious though as to whether there's going to be future cards that allow you to gain the Force trait on a unit that doesn't normally have it, some kind of like Jedi training card or something like that. We'll have to see though. All right, so 5 damage to the base. I'm gonna have Yularen just trade there. Or actually, I play out a Emperor's Royal Guard first. The reason I do it in this order is because that way I heal 1 with Yularen. And we're playing pretty loose with like takebacks or whatever in this game, just FYI if you haven't noticed. The Another seasoned shore trooper hits the field. Now I'm going to take that trade with Yularen for the lightsaber wielding First Legion snowtrooper. And then I'm going to be able to deploy Tarkin, and I will attack the enemy base and give give an experience to my Royal Guard, which now makes it a 4/5 and means that it is not in range of just being attacked and defeated by that seasoned shore trooper, who is going to be a 4/3 because my opponent will be on 6 resources. So let's see how things develop from here. I do have to be a bit worried about do have to be a bit worried about an overwhelming barrage here, of course, but we'll have to see how it goes. All right. Both players on 6 resources. Both players with 3 cards in hand, but my current board is a lot stronger and I'm only behind by 1 HP. On the other hand, my opponent hasn't deployed Vader yet, and Vader will probably deploy this turn or next, depending on whether or not my opponent has a ramp piece this turn. Looks like he's going over for that epic action token, which might indicate a energy conversion lab play. So energy conversion lab into a super laser tech would not be that valuable in terms of immediate result. He would just deal 2 damage to my Emperor's Royal Guard, but it would mean that he could play Vader this turn. However, it ends up being energy conversion lab ATST with a 6 damage swing, defeating that Emperor's Royal Guard in 1 hit, and then also dealing one. It should be 1 damage to the base here, but I think we accidentally put 2 damage on the base instead. But it should just be 1 with Overwhelm because the Royal Guard did have an experience token on it. I'm going to do a barrage here with Tarkin. Defeat that unit and put a damage on the trooper. The trooper hits my base for 4. Yeah. Here I end up deciding that I'm going to. It's kind of an odd situation, but I think what I end up deciding is that I will have. Uh, I could attack with the Snow Trooper in trade, but I end up attacking with Tarkin instead, and he takes damage, but that allows me to put an experience on the Snow Trooper and leave 2 units in play. I'm not sure that was that worth it. I think it would have been probably better to just trade with the Snow Trooper and leave Tarkin. First off, Tarkin could hit the enemy base there for 4. So it'd be a little bit more damage on the enemy base, but then also he would not have damage on him. I don't know. It's hard to say though. This way I do get value out of Tarkin's on attack ability. Not altogether sure that was the right way to do it. All right, Vader hits the field. So here what I want to do is I'm going to hopefully do some damage to Vader and then ambush him with my ATST using the energy conversion lab, which I have yet to use. But the order in which I do this, I decide that I'm going to have Tarkin hit the enemy base first and give an experience to that Snow Trooper. But my opponent has an overwhelming barrage, which is actually on Vader enough to deal 7 damage and defeat both of those, as I have exact 7 HP remaining. So that's a very negative development for me. Um, I had hoped that he would attack Tarkin or something to do some kind of play that would allow me to respond with the do some kind of play that would allow me to respond with the ATST this turn, but he didn't do it that way, and so I'm kind of in trouble here. I think that in retrospect, I was like a little greedy with that attack to try to get the trying to get that experience going and stuff. It might have been better to just have Tarkin attack Vader directly. It would defeat Tarkin, but it would put Vader in range for the ATST. Alternatively, I could have actually had that trooper attack Tarkin, or I could have had the trooper attack Vader, but I think it would make more sense to do it with Tarkin. All right, I deploy Tarkin here, and I have him search for 2 cards. And I end up pulling Piet and Relentless. Draw the Piet there, or play the Piet. My opponent also plays Piet. Vader hits the base for 6. My base is actually in a lot of trouble. My overall HP here is not in a good place. So the question then becomes, how do I stabilize this arena? I have the ATST that I want to ambush in to kill Vader, but I need to put some damage on Vader first. And I'm really worried about that Piet here. So I think what I end up doing is that I ambush Piet with Yularen, or I said Yularen, but what I meant was Callus. So Callus defeats Piet, takes 1 damage, draws me a card. I am going to be able. Now, my opponent has another barrage here with Vader, which is really unwelcome. So that's going to be another 7 damage, which is enough to defeat Tarkin and defeat. So both Tarkin and Callus are defeated, and then there's some damage on Piet, and not enough to defeat him. And now Vader can actually hit my base for 7, which is lethal, so that would be game. I have an out, which is that I can play Colonel Yularen here to heal 1 life. Um, but it's a very unfavorable situation. So yeah, Yularen there heals 1 life. And to be fair, I wouldn't have been in that grim a position if not for the fact that I had accidentally taken an extra damage earlier. But at this point, I'm in big trouble because of Vader's ping ability. Even if I kill him immediately and he doesn't get any more value, that ping can potentially kill me. So what I really need to do is somehow be healing or otherwise getting a lot of value. And I don't see things in my hand that are going to help me do that. So this game is going to go to my opponent. Um, and I think in this case, the critical mistake that I made was getting greedy with Tarkin, attacking the base, not attacking to just put damage on Vader. I think that I needed to be more focused on getting Vader off the board. Because I didn't do that, Vader was able to do a lot of damage, and he's a great target for those overwhelming barrages, which were able to hit me hard. I think in retrospect, if I had had Tarkin attack Vader, and give the experience to the trooper. Maybe he barrages anyway to kill the trooper. Maybe he just attacks to kill the trooper. But I can then ambush Vader with the ATST and get him off the field that turn. And I think from that point going forward, I'm in a much better spot. So ultimately, I think I got a little greedy and was punished for it by Vader doing a ton of damage. Um, and that's kind of what Vader can do. You know, Vader's really scary. He's probably the most formidable leader in terms of fighting ability in the game. But he does take a while to deploy. So I think it would have been better for me to be more focused on setting up an answer for him and getting him off the board with that ATST as soon as I could. Uh, so ultimately 1-1 now, and we'll go into game three. Let's see how we do for this third game. All right, so this time I'm probably gonna start off with Ty LN into +1 experience on Ty LN from Tarkin's ability. I am going first, so I don't have to worry about that tile end getting pinged off. Deploying 1 HP units against Vader is risky because his ping ability can be used to defeat them immediately. However, if it does require him to have played a villainy card first. So in this situation, because I have the initiative, I know that I can play this tie. And even if my opponent deploys a 1 cost villainy unit that would then allow Vader's ping to be used, uh, the I can give an experience to the tie and therefore get it out of range of that ping before my opponent continues further. So there's the tile N being deployed, and my opponent ends up playing Admiral Piet, which is a 2 cost. The ping isn't forthcoming anyway, but the +1 experience there is still a relevant move. All right, going into the next round. Let's see how this goes. All right. So we have uh we have in this situation, each of us hit the enemy base. My opponent brings out a fifth brother, a 3 cost 2/4 that gains raid 1 for each damage on it. And when it attacks, it can deal damage to itself. It can deal damage to enemy units. It's a pretty solid card. I'm going to bring out the Super Laser Tech, and we're going to go on to the next turn. So my opponent can attack here and use the ping ability from Fifth Brother to deal 1 damage to himself and 1 damage to the Super Laser Tech, defeating the Super Laser Tech immediately, and then also hitting the base for 3 damage. That would be a pretty reasonable play. Another thing that he could do is he could actually take out the Super Laser Tech with Piet. He could just make some other play. We'll have to see how this goes. However, I do think that the Super Laser Tech is likely going to become a resource this turn one way or another, which will put me in a position to deploy Tarkin. All right, let's see how it goes. All right, let's see here. So we again have we have that fifth brother who I think is going to make the attack here. He'll then be left on 3 HP. So one of the things about fifth brother is that he's a lot better on offense than on defense. He's only a 2/4. And while he does get powered up by taking damage, it's not actual grit. It's like fake grit, where you instead of getting straight power, you get extra raid, which is power, but only when attacking. So here he does go for the play that I was discussing earlier, doing 1 damage to himself and 1 damage to the super laser technician, and then hitting the base for 3. I go ahead and swing in for 3 with the tie there. And my opponent brings out a super laser tech of his own. Doesn't have a target to ambush it with the energy conversion lab, luckily for me. But is going to be there to potentially ramp up in the future. So I can bring out so I could bring out Tarkin here. I can actually ambush with Agent Callus now that my super laser tech has become a resource. So I could have Agent Callus could defeat either of the enemy units here. I'm going to deploy Tarkin. So in this situation, I'm very conscious of the amount of life total that I would have with Callus. So by doing it this way, it creates a situation where if my opponent uses Vader's ability for 1 damage to Tarkin, um, it's going it's going to allow me to ambush with Callus, hit the fifth brother, and then attack with Tarkin afterwards, giving Agent Callus an experience, and that will mean that Callus will have 3 HP remaining. And with 3 HP remaining, if the opponent attacks with the super laser tech into him, he will not be defeated. So that's kind of what I'm playing for. I'm trying to set this up. And so my opponent does use Vader's ability. Um, Now my opponent could attack with Piet into into Callus there. That is an option. But I'm gonna bring out Callus and ambush the I'm gonna ambush the fifth brother, defeat him. Since he's a unique unit, I get to draw a card. Still have 2 HP remaining. So the super laser tech could attack into me and trade if I don't give an experience. My opponent uses Piet to attack my base for 1. And now I'll have Tarkin hit Piet for 1, or for 2 rather, and then give that 1 experience to Callus. And now Callus is out of range of the Super Laser Technician trade. So I'm in a potentially better situation than I was earlier. Going into this next turn. Now, of course, there are still ways that Callus could be defeated. So my opponent could play a Snow Trooper Lieutenant, for instance, and by that method, trade the Super Laser Tech for Callus. We could see an overwhelming barrage. We could plausibly see, I mean, there's a bunch of removal cards from aggression. So we could see open fire, forced choke. We could even see, maximum firepower as a villainy card. There's a lot of removal options that could be used here. Let's see how this goes. Yeah, okay, let's see here. All right. So it looks like Zuhair are going to play a card from hand. We'll have to see what it is here. And in this situation, I do think the tie here is able to get some nice value. Um, just repeatedly swinging in for 3. And we will see how this continues. I might have forgotten to attack with that last turn, I'm not sure. Ends up being an overwhelming barrage for 4 damage here, so that is enough to defeat. That's going to defeat Callus with 3 damage, and then 1 damage onto the tie. So not the best barrage ever, but is going to get Callus off the field, which is pretty valuable because if he didn't do that, I can have Tarkin defeat. So he ends up actually doing the 1 extra damage, not to the tie, but to Tarkin. And it's pretty valuable to defeat Callus there because if not, if Callus isn't defeated on the first action, I can have Tarkin attack into Piet, defeat Piet, and draw a card from Callus, which is a lot of value. I end up countering my opponent's. I play a command, and once again opting to add 2 experience and then deal damage, using that to give 2 experience to Tarkin and get that super laser tag off the field. Tarkin now a 4/9, though he's taken 3 damage, so he's a 4/6. Vader's ability used here, so that's going to be a ping. 1 damage to the base and 1 damage to Tarkin, or maybe the yeah, it ends up being on Tarkin rather than the tie. Sorry about that. I'm gonna have Tarkin defeat the I'm gonna have Tarkin defeat the Piet there, and then I'm going to have the tie attack, and then we're going to send in the Colonel Yularen repairing 1 damage from the base. Overall, feeling like I'm in a pretty strong position. I have quite a good board, but Vader is probably going to deploy this turn, and that's gonna potentially cause me some problems. So this is a tough resourcing decision. The reason is with 7 resources, I could play both the Royal Guard and the TIE Advanced, which would be really good. But I can't quite. But I would have to resource one of these other cards that's like really impactful to do that. So I end up resourcing the Royal Guard, which is the least impactful card that I have in hand. But yeah, opponent on 7 resources. Vader will likely be making an appearance this turn. However, I do have a fairly strong board and I'm ahead on life. So I also have a Relentless in hand, which I will be able to play in 2 turns as a very strong endgame type unit. We will see how that goes. A basic Shore Trooper Lieutenant deploys here. 2 cost. He is a 4/3 now. Or I said Shore Trooper Lieutenant. I get these things mixed up. Seasoned Shore Trooper. 2 cost, 2/3 with +2 power when you have 6 or more resources. So in this situation, a 4/3 does allow for a potential high damage bombardment here. A overwhelming barrage could deal 6 damage, which would be enough to defeat Tarkin. But of course, if my opponent wants a strong barrage, he could also just wait until Vader deploys. So it's not as high a priority to try to get rid of this as it would be in some other circumstances because Vader is still waiting for a similar effect. My opponent actually decides, wait a minute, I'm gonna ambush with this guy. I'm gonna use this on Tarkin. And now there's 8 damage on Tarkin, which does mean that Tarkin could be killed by Vader's ping. So I actually, to counter that, I play a tie advanced and put 2 experience on Tarkin. Now, with 4 experience, he will not be defeated by 1 barrage or by 1 ping. My opponent then plays Agent Callus, who trades with Tarkin. I consider that acceptable. My opponent does draw a card from that, so it is probably advantageous for the opponent in some regards, but had to spend a lot of resources to do it. I do wish I had that Royal Guard to play now. My tie attacks the enemy base. I'm going to have Yularen attack Vader here. I kind of learned from my mistake last game, and this time I'm going to be prepared to defeat Vader with the ATST ambush next turn. Vader does get to hit the base for 5 and deal 2 damage to the TIE Advanced with his on-attack ability, so he does clear that out, but all things considered could be worse. I take the initiative here. Do wish I had maybe played that Royal Guard, but probably gonna be, probably not gonna be that big a deal. Love to see. Having 5 more hit points on my base might be nice though, and some more damage on Vader with since the ATST has Overwhelm, doing extra damage on Vader does equate to more damage to the enemy base. And there's the ATST ambush play. So that's going to defeat Vader, and the ATST does take 5 damage, which is a lot, but Vader is defeated, and I believe my opponent, however, now has Emperor Palpatine. That's really not what I want to see. So Palpatine deals 6 damage on deployment, and that is enough to clear out both the experienced TIE and the damaged ATST there. I'm going to just take the initiative rather than playing this Shore Trooper. So this turn I can play Relentless. If I play Relentless here, my hope now is that I will be able to next turn play Overwhelming Barrage, defeat the Emperor and whatever other thing my opponent might bring out, and then use Relentless with Overwhelming Barrage, which can hit for 10. Maybe give it an experience with Tarkin, at which point it would kill the enemy base in 1 hit, and hopefully win the game like that. My opponent plays a Snow Trooper Lieutenant, having Emperor Palpatine attack the base for 8. I'm going to take the initiative here. My opponent brings out a Gladiator Star Destroyer, and uses Vader's ping for 1 damage to the Relentless and 1 damage to my base, and that's actually game because in this situation, yeah, I can barrage and take out Palpatine and that trooper, but have taken exactly enough damage that if I do that, the Gladiator can attack and clear out my base, so I do not have a way out of this situation. Tough scenario ultimately, and a close one, but my opponent does have an answer that's going to allow him to get that extra damage through to my base and win the game. And my opponent shows that actually he did have Devastator here. So even in the event that I had taken out even in the event that I had taken out those units with Barrage, Devastator could have cleared me out. So interesting situation. I personally don't think Devastator is a good main deck card, but it's really good in these situations where a game goes all the way to battles between big ships and stuff. All right, so ultimately, yeah, and I'm showing there that I have Devastator myself as one of my sideboard cards, even though we weren't actually playing with the sideboards this game. Okay, so ultimately went 1 and 2 there with the Tarkin deck losing out to ZuhairGalaxy's Command Vader. So the main thing that I think about this Tarkin deck is I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's a cool build, but there's one big issue that I have with it, which is that going double command allows you to play extra ramp, right? But the problem is Tarkin only deploys on 5 resources, and because of that, you don't really need a lot of ramp with him. And yeah, it gets you closer to your endgame units and stuff, but it's not the same thing. Like, ramping when it doesn't bring your leader out earlier is a lot worse than ramping towards your leader deployment. And as a result of that, I think this style of double green deck is likely going to be more effective if it can be paired with a leader that deploys later in the game. So I think there's widespread speculation right now that the last command villainy leader is going to for this set is going to be Emperor Palpatine. If that's the case, Palpatine's a powerful figure in the lore, and if he does end up being the leader, I think he'll probably deploy later in the game than the 5 resources that we see Tarkin deploying on, and maybe a bigger unit like that is going to be more effective when when paired with this style of extra ramp deck. We'll have to see. It might not end up being that way, but I do think it's an interesting question. All right, so that's gonna do it for this one, guys. Thanks to you all for watching, and we will be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content. I will catch you guys later.